And what happens is that when your stress hormones go up, your immune system goes down. Because as you begin to mobilize all this energy for some threat in your external environment, real or imagined, you rob the energy in your internal environment for growth and repair. So if you keep turning on the fight or flight response, you keep turning on the sympathetic nervous system, and you're mobilizing all this energy, you're drawing from this invisible field of vital energy around your body, and you're turning it into chemistry. And if you keep doing that, the field around your body shrinks. And now you are more matter and less energy, more particle and less wave. And now in your life, you are matter trying to change matter. And it's going to take time to get what you want. But as you keep diminishing your vitality, and you keep robbing from this field, the immune system begins to shut down. Because all the troops are fighting some war abroad and there's no homeland security. And IgA levels go down. So we randomly selected 120 people, and we measured their cortisol levels, and we measured their IgA levels. Now, when you're under stress, the emotions that you feel under stress is anger, hostility, frustration, impatience, fear, anxiety, worry, guilt, shame, envy, jealousy, competition. Those are all created by the hormones of stress. And psychology says those are normal human states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness. Because living in stress is living in survival. And stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. Stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis. So, I reasoned, well, what if the reverse was actually true? What if people were taught how to open their heart? And when you're frustrated, and when you're impatient and you're angry, your heart beats out of rhythm. And we've measured that over and over again. The heart gets highly incoherent, and the heart has its own little brain. But when you feel gratitude and thankfulness and care and inspiration, all of a sudden, if you do it properly, your heart will start to get very orderly, very coherent, very synchronized. And so I wanted our students to sustain an elevated emotion for at least 10 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. That's it. But what happens when you experience an elevated emotion, and we know this because we've measured it also, if you can begin to sustain an elevated emotion, this is the creative center right here. It's like dropping a pebble in water. And if you are able to sustain that emotional state, you are dropping pebble after pebble after pebble in a perfect rhythm. And what happens is the field around the body tends to grow. Now you are more energy and less matter, more wave and less particle. And now you begin to feel connected to something greater. And if you can feel more deeply, more richly, and more completely, you're dropping a big stone, and it's creating a bigger wave. And that energy is a frequency. And all frequency carries information, just like a radio wave. And your thought is the intention on that wave. And so, I had them sustain these elevated states for 10 minutes a day, twice a day, or 3 times a day for 4 days. At the end of 4 days, their cortisol levels dropped 3 standard deviations, clinically significant. But their IgA levels went from about 53.5 to 87. That is scientific history right there. They epigenetically signaled new genes in new ways, and their immune system got much, much stronger. And there were a few people whose values were over 100. 10 minutes of gratitude a day could heal you. It's better than any flu shot. So then, living in stress is living in survival. And all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. But human beings, we become addicted to very chemicals of stress, very hormones of stress, and we use the people and conditions and the problems in our life to reaffirm that addiction to the emotion. And we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. Out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field that await you, when you're under stress, you will select the worst case scenario. And you will begin to emotionally embrace that outcome in preparation for it happening. Do you know why? Because when the survival gene is activated, you prepare for the worst. Because if anything less happens, you have a better chance of surviving. And people live their lives that way. And when you get it right, you say, hey, you know how smart I am? You need to hang out with me. But what happens when you don't get it right? It's called anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, OCD. And so then you can begin to forecast some worst case scenario in your mind. And you can turn on the stress response just by a thought alone. You could revisit some past bitter memory, and to the exclusion of everything else, make it real. And your body, as the unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that past experience. When you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease. Because no organism in nature can live in emergency mode for extended periods of time. And it is a scientific fact that the hormones of stress down-regulate genes and create disease. It's a fact. And if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and those chemicals pull the trigger of the gene to create disease, that means that your thoughts can literally make you sick. So if your thoughts could make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts could make you well? And if those chemicals are highly addictive and you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, you can get addicted to your own thoughts. And if you use the people and conditions in your life to reaffirm some emotional addiction, you become addicted to the life you don't even like. And then the unknown becomes a scary place, because in survival, better chances of running from the unknown than facing it. And so then, all of you have done something great in your life. And when you decided to step outside of your comfort zone and take a risk in the unknown, the moment you made that decision, you started to feel uncomfortable. Because the moment you leave the familiar feelings and habits and step into that unknown, the body that's been conditioned to be the mind emotionally can't predict the future. It would rather hold on to its guilt than step into the unknown. It's entirely possible that you judge yourself and judge others all day long and don't even know that you do that, because it's a subconscious program. Some people would rather cling to their unworthiness than take a chance and possibility. And they will argue for their limitations the entire way. But the moment you make a decision to change the way you think, to change the way you act, or change the way you feel, get ready. Because you are going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty, and you're not going to be able to predict your future. And the moment you make that choice from the old self to the new self, you just stepped into the river of change. And the body, which has been conditioned to be the mind, where you said, I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to judge, I'm not going to make excuses, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. You made all those decisions in the morning. And things went really well for about 3 hours. But the body is craving those chemicals just like an addict, because it's addicted to those emotions. And the body starts sending signals back up to the brain. It's trying to unseat you, to return back to safety, to the familiar territory. And you start to hear these sub-vocalizations in your head. You start to hear these thoughts, these voices, and they say, why don't you start tomorrow? Tomorrow's a better day. You're really tired. This isn't going to work for you today. It's my ex-husband's fault that I'm this way. It's my mother's fault. This doesn't feel right. That's the body sending signals back to the brain. And if you respond to that thought as if it's true, that thought is going to lead to the same choice, which is going to lead to the same behavior, it's going to create the same experience, and it's going to produce the same familiar feeling called you, and you're going to say, this feels right. It feels familiar. You see, going from the old self to the new self is the neurological, is the biological, is the chemical, the hormonal, genetic death of the old self. People who say to me, I'm in the river of change, I'm in the unknown, I'm in this void, I can't predict my future, I always say the same thing to them. The best way to predict your future is to create it, not from the known,